Hello, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to what is now being called Batta Fast. मैं हूं अमर नकवी, मेरे साथ हैं उस्मान समीउद्दीन। उस्मान, क्या हाल है आप?
मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ. You're saying that like you're reporting something. It's now being called by the masses. It's now being called Bata Fast. We don't know if it actually is being called Bata Fast. We've just said it.
So, हाल ही में पाकिस्तान में एक फास्ट बॉलर के गिरफ्तार होने पे मुल्क के दीगर शहरों में काफ़ी तहलका मच गया है। और गिरफ्तार होना, तहलका मचाना और फास्ट बॉलिंग के बेताज बादशाह मोहम्मद आसिफ पे आज हमारी ये किस्त है। हम लोग कोई पता नहीं एक महीने से इसको रिकॉर्ड करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, एंड समवेयर बिटवीन द इंटरनेट एंड दिस कंट्री इट्स बीन इम्पॉसिबल टू डू सो।
I
उस्मान,
think
व्हाई
I
डोंट
think
यू?
actually I think you
या
were waiting for this exact moment for your intro into the गिरफ्तार होने वाले fast bowler. I think you were waiting for this. That's actually it.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, like arrest. Already the मतलब हमारी पहली एपिसोड में भी एक काफी गिरफ्तार शुदा बॉलर पे डिस्कशन हुई थी, but even the great Shoaib Akhtar doesn't compare to the absolute evil that Mohammad Asif was.
But we mean evil in the goodest possible sense, of course.
या तो आई थिंक मेरे शायद इसकी एक वजह ये भी है क्योंकि ना बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कि ये फिर से फिक्सरों को हीरो बनाते हैं और ये और वो, एंड आई गेट दैट. आई फील देयर इज अ रिस्पांसिबिलिटी in doing an episode like this where we're talking about a guy where let's go through his crimes, right? Like stealing Veena Malik's curtains, smuggling drugs into the UAE, match fixing,
The least perhaps of all his crimes.
attacking a teammate with a bat, taking banned substances.
No, wait, he
Uh,
was attacked with the bat. Come on, yeah.
sorry,
Don't put
sorry,
that
sorry,
on.
sorry.
Don't
My
put that
bad.
on.
Okay.
Man.
No,
I'm
no
sorry.
victim blaming here. But there, he did take a banned substance and was banned for it.
Yes,
Uh,
he was held holed up in Dubai with Afim on him.
there was this theory also कि आसिफ को PSL में once he became eligible pick नहीं कर सकते थे क्योंकि वो UAE में खेल नहीं सकता because of the ban. But anyways, today we're going to talk about incredibly 3 episodes हो चुकी हैं हमारी podcast की जहाँ हम लोग discuss कर रहे हैं what are our favorite spells of Pakistani fast bowling. Or obviously this will be the 3rd episode which will be discussing a spell against India. And Usman, I know that you wanted to do जो श्रीलंका में आसिफ की स्पेल थी. So why that, and then why did you agree to this one?
Well, I mean, I agreed because I'm not a confrontationist and I didn't want to piss you off. But no, on a more serious note, yeah. So the Sri Lanka spell, you know what? Like it is, I think, the better bowling spell. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Like purely, अगर हम सिर्फ प्योर bowling पे जाएं, I think it's the better bowling spell. कैंडी में जो उसने 11 विकेट ली थी, वो पिच उसमें हेल्प थी हालांकि, मगर वो फिर भी एक श्रीलंकन फ्लैट पिच टाइप थी. उसने अच्छे अच्छे बैट्समैनों को आउट करा उधर, और जिस तरह की उसने बॉलिंग कराई थी गर्मी में, लंबे स्पेल्स, आई थिंक लाइक अगर सिर्फ आप बॉलिंग को देखें तो वो बॉलिंग बेहतर थी. लेकिन as like this podcast proves, like when you talk about fast bowlers and bowling, you don't just talk about the bowling, right? So other things are important. तो एक तो आपसे झगड़ना नहीं था मुझे, I thought कि यार अहमद मेरी ले लेगा, मैं इसी पे जाता हूँ. दूसरी चीज थी कि ऑब्वियसली क्लिक्स के लिए हमें इंडिया को इन्वॉल्व करना जरूरी है इसमें. तो पाकिस्तान और इंडिया का मैच हो जाए तो और भी बेहतर हो जाता है. Or actually, the one thing that it did have going in its favor, and like it's a great spell, of course. Karachi Asif is like a superb spell. One, it's like the origin, like the ground zero of Asif. Like this is where everyone was like, oh damn, ये ऐसा bowler है. इसलिए इससे पहले तो था वो, मगर उस जमाने में पाकिस्तान के पास अच्छे बॉलर्स थे जैसे कि राव इफ्तिखार अंजुम और राना नबीदुल हसन, ये सब थे. लेकिन आसिफ ने जब ये करा ना कराची में, तो everyone was like, oh, okay, this is his ceiling. और फिर जो बैट्समैन इस टेस्ट में डिसमिस करे थे, they were like just world call, like the world roll call of like the greatest batsman to have lived. kind of thing, and plus against India. And also, basically, end of the day, for wanting greater clicks, we decided that, yes, chalo, let's do the India spell. In
So,
short.
just to set this match up, I want to talk about मेरा एक दोस्त और लम्स में class fellow Alicia Feroz Ratani. Alicia did like all of us. We were living in the same wing, and we were all obsessed with cricket. And stats guru us saal pehli dafa figure out hua tha to argue over Wasim and Wakar who is better. And the argument got so loud that the dorm warden came to check in, and then he joined the argument. So this was a cricket obsessed वो और um, हम लोग जो था ये सीरीज जो थी तो दिस वाज द थर्ड टेस्ट और पहले दो निहाई थी बोरिंग लाइक 600 plays 500 type
हाँ.
test thing. So they were really really boring. This was the deciding test और इसमें ये हुआ था कि रात भर सब बॉयज whatever मस्ती वगैरह कर रहे और जॉइंट्स खत्म हो गए और फिर सब सोने चले गए और I don't know if I can say this on air, but whatever, I'm gonna do this. So Alicia
But you're going to
जाग
say
रहा
it
था.
anyway.
या अलीशा जाग रहा था एंड देन लम्स के करीब एक जगह से था एसेंशियली वो मिट्टी को एक थैले में डाल के चर्च कह के बेचते थे एंड वी दैट वाज लाइक द मोस्ट डेस्परेट यू कुड गेट लाइक अगर कुछ और एवेन्यू नहीं है और अब सुबह के 7 बज रहे हैं तो आप किसी से मांग मूंग भी नहीं सकते सो अलीशा scores this and forces himself to stay awake until the first ball and I think in that first over only within first few deliveries, Irfan Pathan takes a fucking hat trick. And Pakistan then, like when Alicia goes to sleep, Pakistan's
Wait,
like 29 for 6 or something. Um, Interestingly, Alicia
wait. So
also
wait. So you're telling me that you guys stayed up all night till the first ball of the match in the morning. So
just
that would have been like
no,
an 11
just
o'clock start.
Alicia did that. So all the rest of us went to sleep.
Okay.
Alicia stayed up, smoked the shitty hash, watched the hat trick, and then went to sleep. I would also like to note that इसी साल में Alicia also saw Australia score 400 and then went to sleep as South Africa chased it down. So some epic. So
Track record is outstanding.
हाँ तो अब अलीशा सो गया और अब हम उठ के बाकी लोग आए हैं दोपहर को उठ रहे हैं उस वक्त तक कामरान अकमल विद with like once Rehan and I were asked by this magazine to like submit entries for the best innings of the 21st century, and they'd ask people all over the world, and then they emailed us saying that no one suggested this innings, but both you and Rehan suggested, and they got me to write on it on Akmal's amazing backs to the wall century. They do that, and then basically by the time
You're
everyone
saying
is awake,
nobody recommended that innings. Nobody chose
no
that
one
innings.
recommend no one recommended it. They in fact they were so surprised कि उन्होंने हमसे फिर पूछा कि भाई आप दोनों में क्या ये क्या scene है and so then like I wrote a little blurb for them. I forget who this was for. मगर फिर उसके बाद क्या कहते हैं तो खैर अब बाकी पूरा डॉर्म उठ गया अलीशा अभी तक सो रहा है and then we see Pakistan in that in both innings they would do that but especially in that innings where the what looked like disaster in the first session had suddenly become a little bit of parity and then Shoaib and Asif just start going crazy and it's not just going crazy like aesthetically fast bowler जब विकेटें उड़ा रहा है गिल्लियां उड़ा रहा है like that's the best time to watch it and do it
Hmm.
against India to do it in Karachi is a city that's not defined by seasons. It's defined by the same weather almost all year round, with like the evening being pleasant. तो कराची की शाम defines Karachi. उस शाम में Mohammad Asif versus India. Oh, you like nothing else compares. Even though Sri Lanka में आपके best friend संगाकारा को उसने out किया था, leaving the ball, which is, as you said, like in terms of pure skill and mastery, that is really hard to top. But what is spectacle in Karachi is insane.
I was covering that game for Crick Info. I would consider like my peak years at Crick Info when we were going to matches and stuff. और एक्चुअली वो जो वेदर था उस टेस्ट मैच का मुझे याद है काफी ओवरकास्ट था कराची में जनवरी का टेस्ट
Yeah,
था
yeah,
और ठीक ठाक ओवरकास्ट था और ठंड भी थी लाइक
yeah.
कराची की जो एक थोड़ी सी ठंड हो जाती है तो हम लोगों ने जैकेट शैकेट पहनी हुई थी और सुबह ही सुबह वो इरफान पठान ने जाके सबको पागल कर दिया 1000 पीसेस ऑलरेडी यानी लंच टाइम हुआ नहीं है और हम सब ने आई थिंक कोई 3-4 पीसेस तो ऑलरेडी फाइल कर दिए थे कि इरफान पठान ने हैट्रिक ले ली, ये हो गया, वो हो गया, ऐसे होने वाला है, वैसे होने वाला है। और फिर उस टेस्ट की जो एक खूबी है ना, व्हिच एक्चुअली स्टैंड्स आउट आसिफ, आई थिंक अ लिटिल बिट इवन मोर, इज द नंबर ऑफ प्लेयर्स who had Pakistani players who had their like all-time best test matches. रजाक, अब्दुल रजाक, ये लोग याद नहीं रखते हैं वैसे। अब्दुल रजाक ने पहली इनिंग्स में 45 मारे थे, दूसरी इनिंग्स में 90 मारे थे। तो 45 पहली इनिंग्स में मारे थे, कामी के साथ उसकी बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट पार्टनरशिप थी। वो उसने 45 और 90 और फिर मैच में 7 विकेट भी लिए हैं, इंक्लूडिंग आई थिंक तेंदुलकर बोल्ड इन द फर्स्ट इनिंग्स। फिर उसमें कामी ने ऑफ
फैसल
कोर्स प्लेड
इकबाल
हिज ऑल
हाईएस्ट
टाइम ग्रेट इनिंग्स व्हिच Faisal Iqbal's highest test score, and probably his actually nahi, his best innings is probably still against Australia and Colombo. But like all-time high score, great innings. Kami played one of the all-time innings, and I think Yuvraj actually, मुझे याद आ रहा है युवराज की उसी टेस्ट में सेंचुरी थी आई थिंक, जो बहुत ही एक जबरदस्त इनिंग्स युवराज ने भी खेली थी, which is probably like he had a couple of good centuries against Pakistan, one in Lahore in the series before this, which was on a green pitch, and one here. Outstanding innings, but Asif, what he did, okay, you can argue maybe it's not his greatest test, but जिस तरह से उसने, you were saying right, जिस तरह से आउट करा है उसने, जिस तरह से बोल्ड मारा है, एक दो विकेट तो उसकी, इतनी अच्छी परफॉर्मेंस थी कि आई थिंक वी ऑल्सो ऑल थॉट कि अच्छा इसकी ये सीलिंग है, मगर अब ये कहां से, अब ये कैसे गिरेगा, हाउ विल ही फॉल डाउन फ्रॉम दिस हाइट, हाउ विल ही fail to replicate this performance forever, and how will, because 3 years before this Umar Gul had a beautiful spell in Lahore, जब उसने इंडिया
या
के खिलाफ उसने भी विकेट ली थी, 5 विकेट ली थी। उसके बाद से उमर गुल डिसअपियर हो गया था, इंजरीज हो गई, एंड ही नेवर, arguably he never lived up to that. White ball के साथ he did, but रेड बॉल के साथ ही नेवर लिव्ड अप टू दैट परफॉर्मेंस। तो आसिफ के साथ भी एक थोड़ी सी ये सोच थी कि यार अच्छा इसने ये कर दिया है, बट व्हाट विल ही डू, you know how will he mess up after this? And oh lord, like he messed up, but in the ways that we didn't think he would ever mess up, and also while at the same time like living up to, you know I mean सिर्फ 23 टेस्ट उसने खेले, but you could argue that he's one of the best fast bowlers Pakistan's ever produced, I think. Like,
इजीली आई मीन आई एम वेरी बायस्ड, मगर मेरे लिए तो इस पे कोई बहस ही नहीं है।
and like I'm being cautious just because I'm an old man, but like surely he was up there. Yeah, the kind of things that he did, he was well up there, I
So I
think.
think I want to resist the temptation to zoom out too quickly, but I'm just going to make
हाँ,
this
yeah,
small point and come back to this. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I think we will also probably, we will show our age क्योंकि अगर आपने आसिफ को नहीं देखा है live, and I don't mean sitting in the stadium, मतलब उसकी ball by ball, तो इट्स रियली हार्ड टू ट्रूली अप्रिशिएट है। और जो अभी उसकी जो आपको यूट्यूब पे भी वीडियोस दिखाई देती है, तो खास तौर पे इस मैच की तो इतनी गंदी एडिट्स हैं कि आधी से ज्यादा वीडियोस पे तो वो वीडियो तब शुरू होती है जब वो बोल्ड हो रहा है या कुछ, लाइक इट्स रियली डिफिकल्ट टू एक्चुअली फाइंड गुड हाइलाइट्स फॉर दिस मैच, एंड particularly with Asif because you have to watch, अब हम दोनों आसिफ पे लिखा हुआ है कि आसिफ was disappointed कि जब वो जो ट्रैप लगा रहा होता है बैट्समैन के लिए, the batter gets out too early, he's upset
Hmm.
about that, right? Like he was really like टेस्ट क्रिकेट इन particular पे जो आपको टाइम मिलता है and that allows for like to play it like a chess match, like no one did that more consciously and more repetitively than Asif did, and I think कि अगर वो highlights में चीज समझना, or yeah, समझना, like I don't want to be like no one will get it, it's just that once you're watching the whole thing I think it becomes very interesting, and I'll come back to that, but I want to go back to this, like one of the wickets he takes, you had sent this screenshot, and there's this really obviously cricket एक colonial game है, और किसी और एपिसोड में हम इन डेप्थ बात कर सकते हैं लाइक ऑल द डिफरेंट वेज colonization impacts it, and one of the ways is कि उसकी जो इंटरनेशनल क्रिकेट की जो ओनली एक्सेप्टेबल जबान है वो अंग्रेजी है, like all the commentary is
Hmm.
almost always in English, the post match is in English, it's, and there's all this in fact ये इनको अच्छी इंग्लिश बोलने नहीं आती kind of insecurity amongst the post colonial states etc, तो उसका एक जो क्यूट tangent है कि जो जो देसी अंग्रेजी में लोग साइंस बना के लाते हैं, And I think about this uncle who's probably like in his 40s 50s, like big guy with a beard and balding, who woke up that morning and wrote on a chart paper, Asif is a charming bowler, thank you. And and then he shows up there in Pakistan, fucks it up in the first half hour, and it's all going to hell. And I do actually, I might be wrong, that he might have brought this on another day, but let's just stick with this story. And then Asif
Yeah.
takes this incredible wicket where like wicket udti bhi ja rahi hai, everyone's going crazy. And the camera comes to him and he is standing impassive as fuck. And he's just like, I knew. I
Told you
didn't come with
so.
like Pakistan, you're a charming team. I came with Asif, you're a charming bowler. Thank you. And as we both discussed, in that age and in Desi English, charming actually means savla, like someone who's attractive but dark. So which attractive but dark is a great way of explaining Muhammad Asif's, whole vibe. Very dark.
It also works, by the way. This charming analogy also works in another way, in that, gora skin obsession to hai Pakistaniyon mein generally. So you can equate the gora skin, the fairer you are, gori rang ka zamana and all that, to like fast bowling pace. लेकिन अगर आपके पास पेस कम है और आप दूसरी चीजें करते हैं, आई अगर आपका रंग कम है थोड़ा, like your सांवला, then you are charming. So actually, him and Abbas are charming bowlers because वो थोड़ा पेस कम है, मगर करते हैं बहुत अच्छे हैं, खूबसूरत नहीं, चार्मिंग है, यानी पर्सनालिटी बहुत अच्छी है, so actually the
This
analogy
is
works
genius,
even better
Muskan.
like that, I feel.
मिसबा की बड़ी चार्मिंग बैटिंग है. Wow, this is, I didn't think charming could be used this way. This is quite
मोहम्मद
genius.
साहब भी बड़े चार्मिंग बैट्समैन थे.
Wow, I love that. But actually, अगर ये जो बात थी, इस पे आई थिंक मैं अब इस तरफ आए कि पाकिस्तान में मोहम्मद आसिफ का एक कल्ट बॉलर बनना, और ये सिर्फ ये नहीं है कि मैं और आप ये बात करें, राइट? Like when you YouTube, it's like you find clips of Imran Khan saying this. You have this amazing clip of Shoaib Akhtar set to this like really sad music, talking about what a
Yeah.
this, this was. You find like Hashim Amla and AB de Villiers and all kinds of people really talking about, like, in the sort of reverence that you talk about, like जैसे कि वो मशहूर चीज है कि whoever heard Velvet Underground, like not many people heard it, but they started a band or whatever, like that kind of reverence. उस तरीके से लोग आसिफ के बारे में बात करते हैं. क्रेजी चीज ये है कि when Asif comes out in the early 2000s, by that time you've had 20 years of, not just in world cricket, but specifically in Pakistan cricket, bowlers coming faster and faster and faster and faster, right? Or
Hmm.
even though Wasim by his late years was not fast the way he was when he came out, but like that was the selling point, right? और उस एक ऐसे मुल्क में जहां ऑब्सेशन इस किस्म की बॉलिंग के साथ है, जहां पेस इज पेस यार, वहां पे आसिफ टू कम एंड देन completely win everyone over is wild. It's like, it's just, and I think that was one of the things that I really wanted to get into. Like, why do you think he was like, it's like, कि जैसे कि कहीं पे पॉप म्यूजिक चल रही है और फिर एकदम से कोई कव्वाली निकाले and that becomes number one, like, because it's so antithetical to what is popular there. Like, how do you think that happened?
You know, I think there was a visual element to it. I think there is a visual element because आप टीवी पे देखते हैं ना, तो अब तो ऑब्वियसली स्पीड गन्स आती है, स्पीड फौरन आ जाती है. उसके जमाने में भी थी, लाइक आसिफ इज नॉट दैट लॉन्ग अगो. उसके जमाने में भी स्पीड गन्स आती थी. बट आई थिंक आप टीवी पे जब होते हैं तो एक, इफ यू सी स्टंप्स बीइंग बोल्ड and falling over, or batsmen being LBW, then the idea of pace is like a homogeneous space,
Hmm.
until like the commentator or the gun adds some nuance to show that replay pe कि अच्छा इतना तेज नहीं था वो. 130 kilometers an hour and 150 kilometers an hour on TV at least, it doesn't, like, you can't immediately tell कि, oh, ये बहुत तेज थी, अच्छा वो कम तेज थी. Like, so एक तो उसका ये था, I think, because his style of victims, his style of wickets was always bold, LBW. हालांकि he was that kind. The in swinger, the in ducker is like the Asif trademark. And actually, I wanted to even talk about that ball that he bowled to Lakshman, which is a crazy ball, which Cricinfo की list पे हमने उसे second number पे करा था ball of the century, like the amount that it cut back. So उसका visual element आसिफ का was fast bowling, was pace bowling, was rock star bowling, कि वो stumps उड़ा रहा है, वो LBW कर रहा है, bouncer शाउंसर इतनी नहीं होती थी, मगर उसकी movement made up for that pace. एक तो I think ये था कि it cut across, Waqar bowling someone, Asif bowling someone, roughly equates to the same thing, I think, visually at least. कि वो fast bowling dismissal, it's not like a Glenn McGrath को अगर याद करते हैं, who was probably a more similar bowler to Asif. आप उसे याद करते हैं तो उसका जो आप प्राइम डिसमिसल सोचते हैं, कॉर्ड बिहाइंड
Yeah.
इयन हीली पकड़ रहा है, या मार्क वॉर या मार्क टेलर स्लिप्स में पकड़ रहे हैं, which they're great dismissals, of course. A fast bowler will argue that every dismissal is the same, but आप जब डंडे उड़ाते हैं ना, तो that's like, ये है एक फास्ट बॉलर. तो आसिफ, बिकॉज वो डंडे उड़ाता था और उसकी एटीट्यूड ही फास्ट बॉलर की थी. महिला, यू मेंशन्ड अर्लियर कि वो ट्रैप सेटअप करता था, और गुस्से होता था खुद अपने आप से कि मैंने बहुत जल्दी आउट कर दिया. तो जैसे वो महिला को मुझे याद है, उसी टेस्ट में, कैंडी टेस्ट में, महिला को बोल्ड मारता है वो, या आई थिंक कॉट, शायद स्लिप पे कॉट करता है, बट 2 balls before that he's hit him for 4 through covers, and Asif claps. Asif, like, goes up to him and claps the shot, saying well played, when actually he's saying कि हाँ तुम हो ऐसे चे, मैं तुम्हें भी देखो कैसे आउट करता हूँ. And so he had that, the hair, of course, and the personality. तो एक तो उसकी, that was the thing that cut across, कि अच्छा ये fast bowler, that identified him कि हाँ he's a fast bowler. And that kind of made him mainstream. It's like, I'm trying to think of your music analogy. Agar, I don't know, you're better at this. Like, if you can think of a real mainstream guy who doesn't play underground kind of music but looks the part. You know what I mean? It's that kind of
Yeah.
thing that he was doing.
Yeah. 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 I mean, actually, तो मेरे दिमाग में जो एनालॉजी थी, कुछ मैं इसके बारे में सोच रहा था, एंड कि एक बॉलर जो जो जिसकी पेस लाइक 70s अर्ली 80s में है और से सीम और स्विंग करता है, you expect that bowler to be like the prototypical England or New Zealand bowler, right? Like in another
Yeah, we,
world, like
we, we call them a county trundler, right? If
yeah,
if if
like
you saw those, yeah.
yeah, like I mean, where notes में था कि like Mohammad Asif should have been like the greatest New Zealand fast bowler of all time, because like that's where it makes sense. And ये मैं सोच रहा था, and I was like, it's like I feel like white pace bowling is often a lot more like this. So like, even though obviously this is, I'm generalizing hugely, like Courtney Walsh was also that type of a bowler, and all the greats were obviously really good at lining length and discipline, blah blah. But still, like there's a sense of whiteness with this kind of bowling that I associate. And then I was thinking about that Twitter account, which is like stuff white people like, which is kind of caricatures what like middle class Americans like. And one of the things was like stuff white people like, black music that black people don't listen to anymore. So the same way, like stuff white people like is like Wes Anderson films, and I was like, yeah, like Mohammad Asif's skill set and execution is like if somebody from Sargodha was making a Wes Anderson film set in Sargodha. And you're like, this doesn't make sense, and yet it's fucking amazing. Like,
And yes, it
and
totally does.
because इसके बारे में मैं जब I was watching these other bowlers, like Jimmy Anderson talks about learning from him, but like more specifically like McGraw or like those types of bowlers who you would think are closer to Asif. Like one of the things that I realized is अगर आप McGraw की delivery को draw करना है, you can use a ruler, and maybe you look at like peak Wasim and you can use or Jimmy Anderson, and you can use like a compass. So like one is like
Hmm.
straight lines, one is like clean circles, but like Asif is like someone with intense anxiety trying to draw a straight line. Like uski ball bhi aise aati thi. It's crazy. Like
That's why.
even on
That's why.
super slow mo,
Look,
you not
you've
tell.
hit upon the truth. You've done it. You've discovered why the wobble ball, uski wobble seam ball है ना,
Yeah,
because वो anxiety ridden.
yeah. Like और वो आपको समझ ही नहीं आता है कि ये क्या होने वाला है इस बॉल के साथ. And अभी you just mentioned Mahela hitting him for four. I was going through highlights. Like something that was crazy is how many of his dismissals the batter has hit him for four, like a few deliveries before that. And knowing how Asif was setting these things up is kind of crazy. And he's not somebody who gets hit a lot. He's
Hmm.
chasing the wicket, so then they hit him a lot. Like his economy rate is always like पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमी रेट की तरह,
Hmm.
very very low. So the thing was actually that when he was getting hit for four, it's very easy to believe that this is part of the plan that Asif is kind of doing, and in that way, it feels like he's doing a heist.
So it genuinely used to be, from what I like ever gathered, it genuinely used to be a part of his plan. Like McGrath की famous चीज है, एंडरसन की भी एक famous बात है, ये वसीम ने भी बोला है कि यार जब उन्हें चौका लगता था ना गुस्सा आता था उन्हें कि how dare you hit me for a four, because bowlers don't like getting hit for fours. Like Anderson famously, sometimes Anderson in his more defensive phases has been accused of like not searching for the swing, not bowling full, bowling back of length, ताकि उसे कोई चौका नहीं मार सके. Stuart Broad के साथ भी यही कहते हैं. But with Asif, he was genuinely like, that's why he would leave, like, he would leave a gap through cover when he had the new ball. And, one of the things that he used to do, which is very subversive for Pakistani bowlers, was कि, और इसने मुझे बोला भी था इसने ये कि आप पाकिस्तानी बॉलर्स, बॉल एक न्यू होती है तो वेरी क्विकली दे स्टार्ट वर्किंग ऑन इट टू मेक इट ओल्ड. वो रफ कर दिया एक साइड को, पिच पे फेंक रहे हैं, एंड दे मेकिंग श्योर दैट दे स्टैंडिंग जस्ट वन साइड ऑफ द बॉल. Asif was completely subversive and he said that I always tried to keep the ball as shiny as possible because उसकी लॉजिक ये थी कि देखो रिवर्स तो आ ही जाएगी इवेंचुअली, इवन इफ यू कीप बोथ साइड्स शाइनी लॉन्ग इनफ, रिवर्स को तो आना ही है. लेकिन अगर आप उस शाइनी बॉल के साथ उनके ऊपर से 6-7 आउट कर ही दें तो फिर उसमें क्या, यानी उसमें क्या बुरा है, यू डू इट एनीवे. सो ही यूज्ड टू, आई थिंक ही यूज्ड टू लाइक नॉट माइंड एट ऑल बिकॉज ही सॉ इट एज पार्ट ऑफ दिस कि मैं ये कवर छोड़ रहा हूं और मैं इस लेंथ पे कराऊंगा तो मेरे रन जाएंगे. सो इफ यू सी एक्चुअली, वी सेइंग कि ही वाज इकोनॉमिकल एंड ही वाज. Like, if you see some of his best spells, he goes at like, maybe 3.5, 4 and over, or three and a half and over, and he used to get hit for boundaries. But that's because वो lengthy ऐसी करा था. So he was, that way he was always like very, very attacking. And like you say, it was completely a heist. People used to fall for it. But his genius, and this is what sets him apart, was that he could get you out that way. कि आपको चलो चौका दे दिया, गैप खोल दिया, आउट कर दिया. But he could also get you out the defensive way. So, Sangha, leaving balls going across him, leaving balls going across him, leaving balls going across him, playing one going across him, playing another going across him, leaving one going across him. Oh, it's come back in, you're bored. So Sangha has not tried to do anything aggressive, anything attacking, and yet he has still not just dismissed him, but bowled him. And there's numerous examples of him having done this where he would just work away at you. And he used to say, that he liked bowling to guys like Dravid more than Sehwag, for example, because Sehwag बहुत ज़्यादा attacking करता था, and I think he used to feel, I never worked out quite what he meant, but I think he meant कि it's an easier challenge कि सहवाग चलो इतनी अटैक कर रहा है तो कहीं ना कहीं तो वह वैसे ही आउट होगा. But somebody like
So
Dravid, he always felt that he could stick to one plan and keep working away at his patience essentially and impose his own genius on that guy's patience.
so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is actually ये दोनों batters को out करता है इस match में. And there's a clip of just the 2-3 balls that Sehwag gets out, and
Hmm.
क्या नाम है यार, who's that bearded Indian commentator?
Arun Lal, lovely
Arun
guy, by the
Lal.
way. Arun Lal, yeah.
Yeah, Arun Lal and somebody else, Dean Jones,
Dean
are
Jones as well.
commentating.
Late.
And
Yeah,
then he gets this one ball that actually is a wicked away swinger, and Sehwag misses it completely, and then it comes back in, and he gets bowled. Or like as you just said, like the Sehwag, the setup even is like boom boom. Ek
yeah.
ball, yeah, ek ball, wo. As you said, like the Sangakkara one takes like overs, and then the Dravid one, especially the one that he gets out, Dravid got behind. I've watched that replay so many times. I still don't get what happens in it because it looks like if सीधी सीधी उसने ball कराई है, but there's something happening which cause, and it's not like okay, it's like कोई, even someone like Yuvraj Singh or whatever who's not got the most solid technique, so they
Yeah,
might
yeah.
get themselves into a bad position. It's Rahul fucking Dravid, dude. Like वो banda somehow gets outside the line of the stumps and he's falling over and he's getting twisted open. And to this day, I don't understand वो delivery में ऐसा क्या मतलब the Sehwag one is like
Hmm.
so obvious because the movement
Yeah,
is so wild, and
yeah.
the Dravid one is actually the वही जो अभी बात कर रहे हैं कि जो आसिफ का actual out करने का तरीका था जो शायद in that way this match is not representative because he's got like a lot of those kind of, highlight real wickets. But जो the true essence of the Asif thing is that, right, like वो किस तरीके से कर रहा था. In fact, it made me start thinking about music. There's a bunch of things I was thinking about. There was this idea, खासतौर में, I feel you've had your complicated relationship with it, but like that insight about Hal and how it relates to cricket, and I don't think it's just Pakistan cricket, like sport, is such a genius insight, and particularly, our culture and our religious practices, like, regardless of the faith in South Asian religious practices, there is this idea of getting into a state of like a transcendent phase, and there's like techniques that we use to get there. और कवाली में obviously आपका मकसद यही होता है कि जो एक
Hmm.
किस्म से, जो in a very basic sense आप जिक्र कर रहे हैं, you're talking about like a holy figure and God in most cases, or the prophet or whatever, and then that crescendos, um and when it starts crescendoing to, they do think this thing just का like musical term जिसको तकरार कहते हैं, right, कि आप your repetition हो रही है, or you're like
हाँ.
reducing like a big line to like maybe just a few words or a phrase or whatever, and it goes from slow to like fast, 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 fast. And you are supposed to enter a state of like a mystic transcendental. I think that was one of the things I thought about with Asif, like the kind of like hypnosis to it. Like there is like a musicality to it, right? Like where there's like wo jo sanga wali agar, that's why I feel like you have to watch it live, because you're watching it and you're seeing it almost feels innocuous. Like if it's not Asif, you'll be like, kya boring bowling kara raha hai or
Yes.
whatever. And it's going, it's going, it's going, and you almost sense a rhythm. And even the batter, whether they like it or not, they get caught up in that rhythm where eventually now their bat is moving further away from the body. Now their legs are opening up a little bit too much. Now they're eyeing that cover too much, until finally that mistake happens.
There's a great there's a great example of this, which actually didn't get him a wicket. But so the Lakshman dismissal, of course, in that Karachi test, the big bowl that comes back a long way. Even that was slightly there, but it was only he only had like 5 balls at him. They had Although Lakshman had opened, they kept away from each other for like 11, 12 overs, I think. And then he got 5 balls at him. उसने उसे एकदम पक्का करा in, and then one that was pitched out wider but came even further and bowled him like amazing ball. We made it ball of the century, second on the ball of the centuries list in the TCM thing that we did. But the better example of this was I wrote about it actually maybe during that test match. It was the Melbourne test of the Sydney Test series. So 2009-10 की बात है ये.
Yeah.
पहला टेस्ट जो ऑस्ट्रेलिया जीता था, because they win everything against Pakistan. In Australia they haven't like not even drawn one for God knows how many years now, since 96. So पहला टेस्ट था, शेन वॉटसन बैटिंग कर रहा था, और पाकिस्तान की लुल स्टार्ट थी, कुछ नहीं कर रहा था पाकिस्तान ने. They were already looking like they were going to lose that test match from like a day one or day two or whatever it was. But Asif started bowling what looked like this really defensive field to Watson, where and I think Watson was nearing his century maybe, and he bowled at him like well outside off stump. So like, I don't know, maybe fifth, sixth stump line. He had a 8-1 field. Leg side पे कोई नहीं था. एक बंदा था leg side पे, and he had an 8-1 field and like dried up the runs completely. So he was playing to some team plan. And I kid you not, he did this for like, I'm trying to remember from memory, but I think it was like easily 4 or 5 overs that he kept. Not every ball was at Watson, of course, but the plan to Watson, 4-5 over उसने लगातार, sixth stump, fifth stump. Watson was leaving, Watson was maybe reaching out, but delivery by delivery, Watson was getting pulled out, pulled out, pulled out, pulled out. And then suddenly, like 5 overs, and we were like falling asleep, because एक ही चीज हो रही थी, वो सब repetition चल रहा था, हम लोग उस trance like sleep state में जा रहे थे. Then suddenly, from out of nowhere, he bowled this one ball, which now you've got to imagine Watson is now standing almost, or his first step is from middle and off to almost outside off, because उसकी line एकदम पक्की हो गई है कि वो वहां पे reach करेगा. Suddenly, Asif bowls one ball, and no ball has really swung or moved. And this ball, like, starts off, I would say, and swings, like, wildly swings towards his leg stump. एंड आई स्वेयर टू गॉड अहमद, मुझे अभी यानी वो बॉल आपको शायद कहीं वीडियो पे ना मिले, मगर मेरे दिमाग और मेरे दिल पे वो छपी हुई है. इट मिस्ड लेग स्टंप by like 2 or 3 centimeters, and everyone behind the stump, every Asif, Watson didn't have a clue what had happened. but he just missed bowling him on leg stump by like centimeter. And बाद में, like I got time to speak to Asif afterwards, and I was like, कि वो, I noticed it. Other people noticed it as well. I was like, कि ये क्या था? तो कह रहा था उसे basically that was this plan कि उसे वो इतना पक्का कर रहा था outside off stump, और इतनी उसमें discipline थी और control थी that he kept going. Every single ball was outside that fifth, sixth stump line, and suddenly उसने एकदम सबको, पूरी दुनिया को चे बना दिया कि ये देखो, ये मेरा मोमेंट है. एंड बट ही लाइक मिसकैलकुलेटेड, एंड ही सेड टू मी कि यार वो बॉल बस मुझसे थोड़ी सी निकल गई, अगर वो लग जाती ना तो दैट वुड हैव बीन माय ग्रेटेस्ट विकेट एवर. He missed it literally by like centimeters. And commentators were like, what's happened there? Is that just a loose ball that he's bowled? And it was like, no, it's not a loose ball. He was just playing the long game. And he had you going for like 4 or 5 overs before he tried to do this. And that, I think, not only speaks to what you were talking about, कि उसकी ये, the transcendental kind of repetitive hal moment, but also like just his own pure genius. Like he basically made, and I wrote this line in that hal piece, he made the world submit to what he was doing. It wasn't that we had a choice. उसने पूरी दुनिया को, Watson must have been on 1890 at the time, and yet he sucked everyone into that one moment. And oh my God, if it had paid off, if we had bowled him, I would have thought it's the greatest wicket I've ever seen in Test cricket.
Yeah, I feel this is actually this is a great example because I think cricket के एक जो बहुत unique और खूबसूरत चीज है is कि in most sports, particularly these modern sports, like you're really battling the opponent, and then the rest of the conditions are more or less static, right? Like whether it's basketball or whether it's football, maybe like if you're playing at a high altitude, football में बड़ा फर्क पड़ता है, basketball में भी पड़ता है वो, but वो हर sport में पड़ता है. But other than that, like basketball में तो it's indoors, तो बारिश वारिश भी नहीं हो रही, या football है तो बारिश से थोड़ा सा पड़ता है ये वो, it's there's a lot of uniformity, right? Like and again, tennis has different surfaces, but within those, there's cricket is one where like even within the same city, oval
Hmm.
और lords की pitches
हाँ.
बड़ी मुख्तलिफ है. Like आपके एक बहुत like nature, and in the broadest sense is a really major, the third wheel of this kind of thing. It's not just you versus the opponent, right? And I feel that Asif was really adept at actually, though usually you're focusing on the opponent and both of you are trying to overcome the elements, he was really not dealing with the opponent as much as the elements were like the pitch and the ball and the elements. I think like Asif used as like a musician uses an instrument, where he was, बिकॉज द रीजन आई इतनी मैं यहाँ बढ़ा चढ़ा के बात कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि आसिफ इस किस्म की बॉलिंग सिर्फ मेलबर्न और ओवल में नहीं, वो मतलब शेखपुरा और क्या कहते हैं फैसलाबाद और कैंडी
ऑकलैंड हर
और
जगह पे.
ऐसी मतलब किसी पिटी या हर जगह, वेयर एवर यू पुट हिम he can bowl like that. And I feel that comes from an elemental understanding that has less to do with के wrist snap करनी है जो कुछ भी, like his technique was his own as well. And like I feel the only thing I can compare him to is like a musician figuring out how to play this instrument, and like what, particularly those made out of natural materials, like what is it doing today and how do I adjust to it? Like that's what he seemed to be
Yeah,
doing.
I think you're right. And I also wonder उसमें कितना एक एलिमेंट आपका अपना यूनिक, जो तुमने you referred to it there, कि आपकी एक यूनिक एक बीइंग है, एक प्रेजेंस है जिसके तहत आप ये सब कर सकते हैं. So Asif worked out pitches. He was smart. He would immediately pick up. One of the things they say about Bumrah now a lot is that you see how he improves his bowling the longer he bowls on that pitch. So like he rocks up on a pitch and he understands within 3 or 4 overs. I think Monga ne ek piece kara tha iske upar, in which he tried to work out, and like within 3 or 4 overs he's understood exactly what the pitch is like and what it requires, and he does it much better than any bowler on his side or in the opposition. And I think Asif he had that he figured out exactly what was needed. And if it wasn't, if the pitch wasn't especially responsive, then he always had that fail safe of just being tight and being in that corridor, which anyway gets you wickets any time of the day, any pitch of the day. But also he had, what I was saying was that uh, he had the physical attributes, so he was like tall, lanky, he had these lovely long arms. He has still, and his fingers are crazy, like Jimi Hendrix long fingers, and वो कहता है कि मेरी इंडेक्स फिंगर पे, शहादा फिंगर पे कहता है कि शहादत फिंगर पे उसका एक वो छाला जैसे बन गया बिकॉज ही बोल्ड सो मच. बट यू नो फॉर मोस्ट बॉलर्स दैट वुड बी इनफ कि हाँ मेरा छाला है यहाँ पे इसलिए मैंने इतनी बॉलिंग कराई है. आसिफ क्या सोचता है? आसिफ कहता है कि वो जो छाला है ना, मुझे लगता है उसकी वजह से मैं जो बॉल रिलीज करता था थोड़ी अलग रिलीज करता था और बॉलर से. He's that to him is like natural thinking, that he's thought that far ahead कि उसने ये देखा कि हाँ यहाँ पे मेरा छाला है, वो बॉल मुझे लग रहा है कि वो बॉल पे थोड़ा डिफरेंट रिलीज एक्शन छोड़ता है उस छाले से because of his wrist and all so great. So he had the physical attributes, but you're right in that he made it all count. Many players have the physical attributes, right? Many athletes have the physical attributes without ever necessarily translating it into performance or even particular sense, particular smartness. Mohammad Sami had the physical attributes to be a fast bowler, lean, snake hipped, and quick and fast pitch muscles and everything. But maybe he didn't have something else that was missing. And Asif had all these things and he put it together. So yeah, he would get to a pitch, he would see a ball. आसिफ साहब को कभी ये कंप्लेंट नहीं आई थी कि यार ये कोकाबरा बॉल है और ये डूक्स बॉल है. उसने दोनों बॉल के साथ आसिफ जैसी चीजें करी हैं. He's gotten wickets with the Kookaburra on Pakistani pitches. He's gotten wickets with the Dukes in England, gotten wickets in Australia, like wherever, like you said, wherever he went. And I think part of it was this Bumrah-like quality. He figured out exactly what needed to be done on that pitch much quicker than other people did, much quicker than other bowlers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think कि जो वही जो बात है ना कि like I feel with a lot of other guys that we're talking about like athletes and or competitors etc. Asif to me feels like, and I did this brief interview with him, which is the worst journalism I've ever done because it's very obvious that like मैं कह रहा हूँ हम तो दुआ कर रहे हैं आप टीम में वापस आए. And I was like, God, dude, like have
वो
some
बैठा हुआ है ऐसे ही like Lord.
respectability. But anyway, उस उसमें क्या कहते हैं कि मेरे कहने का मतलब ये कि like he you get the sense that a he was looking at as an art form, as a craft and whatever, right? So he's not really focused on the opponent. And I'll come back to this later, but in that interview he's just like देखिए जैसे कि आसिफ देखिए जैसे कि एबी और केपी तो मेरे बनी है ना. तो like it's like कि देखिए जैसे कि पाकिस्तान में आम अच्छा मिलता है, like some really obvious fucking thing the way he said it. um but I really felt like, yeah, he didn't give a shit about like the opposition as much as he cared about like the craft, right? Like you had this great tweet about when he dismisses Ed
Hmm.
Joyce once.
चल बे.
He's like he can't even be bothered to celebrate. He's like as you put it, like a Jaja asli batsman page or something like that, right? Like he's just kind of like fuck off. Like I can't believe my talents had to be wasted on this. That sense of woe, and to me again another reach of a pop culture analogy. In the original Maula Jat, what I really love, and me and my friend Vasik Rao discussed this a lot. Like Noori Nath's character is so fascinating because in South Asian films in general, you have like good versus evil. Like there's it's very clear ki acha hai, ye bura hai. And then you had like that anti-hero kind of angry young man of Amitabh or anti-hero Shah Rukh, who are like you have some sympathies for, but they ultimately end up being, they're a bit
Hmm.
compromised, but they end up going one way or another. So like a bad person with a heart of gold type of narrative. But Nuri Nath, essentially, if you watch the original Molajat, is kind of like a nihilist. Like the only thing he really cares about is like I want somebody who can challenge me. And in the remake, they give like Hamza Ali Basi does a great job. I felt, which I hate to compliment him. He did a really good job, but in his character, they gave a moral reason कि उसकी बहन को मारने लगे
हाँ.
थे इसलिए
Yeah.
उसको बचाने के लिए कातिल बन गया and then he became with the original Navinath, he's just like
Yeah.
he's just a bad mofo, and all he wants is to find somebody who's good enough to challenge him. And you really get that vibe with Asif. Okay, man, like I'm just the baddest mofo around. Bring on your best, and I will get rid of it. It doesn't really matter if I'm doing it for Pakistan or if I'm doing it for like Ohio South Asian community Ramzan invitational teams. like, like I'm just gonna be the baddest guy around.
There's nothing wrong with the Ohio, I believe, is what you called it, league, and I think he's in Maryland. I don't know how close that is to Ohio at all. But नहीं उसमें डेफिनेटली एक ये था, एक आई डोंट थिंक उसके सामने कोई भी बैटर आया था ना जो ही थॉट कि अच्छा यार मैं इसे तो नहीं आउट कर सकता, यानी कभी. एंड दैट इज जस्ट लाइक इनेट confidence. I think he was born with that kind of confidence. मुझे याद है उससे पहली बार जिसने पाकिस्तान के लिए खेला था सिडनी टेस्ट में ऑस्ट्रेलिया के खिलाफ 2004 में, 2005 का न्यू ईयर्स टेस्ट था सॉरी, उसमें ठीक ठाक बॉलिंग कराई थी, फ्लैट सी पिच थी, उसने ठीक ठाक बॉलिंग कराई और फिर until Gilchrist hit him for like a 6-4 and a 6 and kind of spoiled his figures a little bit. And then that was the last test he played. But, he said to Woolmer, Marhoom Woolmer, who was a coach then, he said that Woolmer was explaining to him, Chalo, we're not going to have you for the next test match. Keep trying or whatever. And he apparently, apni tutti putti English mein bola Woolmer se, don't worry, coach, I know I'll be back. As in, he had that confidence at that time. You had Shoaib and Sami और वो obsession था पेस का, और भी जो फास्ट बॉलर्स आ रहे थे, मोहम्मद इरशाद एक जमाने में थे, और भी जो फास्ट बॉलर्स पिक कर रहा था पाकिस्तान, फास्ट बॉलर्स पिक कर रहा था, but he knew even then कि यार, I'll be back and I'll be as good. So he had that kind of, and I don't know where it comes from. I have no idea. I'd love to kind of meet him and try and figure out where that confidence comes from, because it's not like he came from a very like what am I saying, upper class economic background. He came from like fairly I guess regular but small town kind of. His father was I think like a cow herder, and sold milk. Doodh wala tha, I think his father is or was. So he came from there, but he always had this, and I think it was because he recognized his genius. That sounds like a really easy thing to say, but I think he recognized how good he was. And हम लोग बात करते हैं तो लगता है कि बहुत, या हम लोग तो फैन बॉयज हैं वैसे ही आसिफ के, और ये और वो बकवास, हम लोग पिपी पूरी उसकी बनी हुई है आसिफ के ऊपर. बट लाइक इफ यू जस्ट लुक एट द यूनिफॉर्मिटी ऑफ ओपिनियन ऑफ पीपल हु हैव कम अक्रॉस हिम, किसने नहीं बोला हाशिम आमला. जब भी उससे पूछो, हाशिम आमला कहता है यार उससे बड़ा बॉलर मैंने नहीं खेला है. एबी डिविलियर्स, ओनली लाइक द ग्रेटेस्ट बैट्समैन, ग्रेटेस्ट बैटर, or in the top 3 greatest batters of the modern age. AB de Villiers, उसके रोंगटे खड़े हो जाते हैं जब आसिफ की बात होती है. Mohammad Amir, the famous thing he said कि यार, he said this to me दोहा में जब उसका बैन हुआ था पहली बार स्पॉट फिक्सिंग का, कहता है कि यार उस्मान भाई, आपको आमिर जैसे बॉलर्स तो बहुत सारे मिल जाएंगे पाकिस्तान में, आपको आसिफ भाई जैसा बॉलर एक कभी नहीं मिलेगा फिर से. Stuff like that. I'm trying to think of who else. KP, of course, has like nightmares about the kind of bowler that he was. So it's not just us fanboying him and bigging him up. His genius, his confidence was there from the start. I'm trying to remember कि वो पहला ही टेस्ट एक है जिस टेस्ट की हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं इंडिया का, जिसमें उसकी सेलिब्रेशंस थोड़ी सी exuberant थी. And maybe that was because it was the first time he was kind of doing it and running through. But if you look at the majority of his celebrations after this, वो चाहे AB de Villiers हो, चाहे Michael Clark हो, one of the best dismissals, Michael Clark at Sydney 2010, like did him up like a total rag doll, like unbelievable how he played Michael
Yeah,
Clark in that
yeah.
test match, right? किसी का भी तुम डिसमिसल देख लो, पॉन्टिंग शॉन्टिंग, ही लाइक अच्छी सेलिब्रेशन होती थी, बट इट वाज वेरी लाइक हाँ हाँ, it was basically a degree of Ed Joyce, depending on the amount of respect he had for that batter, a little more, and i.e. he had more respect for everyone than Ed Joyce, basically at that level. But no, no disrespect to Ed Joyce, but उसी तरह का था ना कि हाँ मैंने तो आउट कर दिया. एक बार उसने आमला को आउट करा था कराची में, डेड पिच पे, कुछ नहीं हो रहा था उस पिच पे, कुछ नहीं हो रहा था, and Asif was coming back from an elbow injury, and he bowled him this beautiful delivery, again typical Asif, slanting in and then clipping the top of off. Amla was on 78, pretty well settled at the crease, और कुछ भी नहीं, बस वो हाथ उठाते हुए हाँ आसिफ चला गया. Like there was always an inevitability about his dismissals. और I think हम लोग जो एक बार डिस्कस कर रहे थे, तुमने ये पॉइंट रेज करा था, you might want to talk about it more, कि वो जो एशिया वर्सेस अफ्रीका जो एक ओडीआईज हुए थे, बैंगलोर में खेले थे, उसमें इसने एबी को आउट करा था और पीछे इसका कीपर था MS धोनी. एंड आई थिंक धोनी, I think you remember noticing that Dhoni got pretty excited about the dismissal, right? Like unusually excited. And that's because he, I think, recognized some kind of a,
Yeah.
I don't know, like a kindred genius spirit or something.
Yeah, I mean, that was the crazy thing that you never see Dhoni react like that. And obviously, it's a very unscientific metric. Similarly, a scientific metric is कि मैंने कोई अब कुछ 4 दफा या 3 तो मिसालें मेरे दिमाग में भी हैं. एक टेस्ट में, एक इसी एशिया अफ्रीका में, और एक और आई थिंक एक और टेस्ट में, अक्रॉस 2 डिफरेंट टूर्स आई थिंक. ये एबी डिविलियर्स को आउट करता है. जब भी आउट करता है एबी डिविलियर्स की ओह करके एक आवाज भी आती है. सो इट्स नॉट जस्ट के The ABTV has gone out 100 billion times, but every time that Asif gets him out, you feel like he's like, "Oh shit, I just got hoodwinked."
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy part to it,
यार मेरी तो ये
where
एक एक
like,
बिलीफ रही है और and this bordering I know it's bordering on like I don't know, not conspiracy theorist but bordering on the outlandish crazy but I will live for this belief I will die on this hill that अगर आसिफ बैन ना होता उसकी करियर खत्म नहीं होती तो संगाकारा और केपी और एबी डिविलियर्स की जो इंटरनेशनल करियर्स है ना वो बहुत फर्क लगती है हमें अब I will die on this hill. Like I will definitely get up on I will build this hill and I will die on it.
amazing. I feel a lot of Pakistan will applaud you and, and join you in that. Uh, but I think मुझे ये जो बात की ना about his lack of celebration, and I think like once he becomes a fully formed version of himself, the one thing that I always remember is that I really loved Ocean's 11, Steven Soderbergh, and Steven Soderbergh's done some really incredible
Yes.
heist films because he does the Ocean's trilogy, which are really like, and I'll get to why they're fun. And then he does this like his more recent. They're not actually heist films, but they're heist films, and each one of them is actually set against a larger corporate capitalist heist. Like this high flying bird is actually against like how professional athletes are
Hmm.
manipulated by their leagues. His other movie just come in, naam abhi dimag se nikal raha hai, that is at the backdrop of how city planners did racial segregation to change how New York looked and its parks and whatever. Logan Lucky is about like predatory banking practices and how. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. But in Ocean's 11, he keeps it very simple. It's fucking entertaining, and a good heist film, like a good heist, is there's no violence involved. It charms people. It tricks people. It's like you almost it makes you feel good rather than scared or intimidated right until like they fuck you over. And with Brad Pitt and Clooney in that first series, like in that first film, they Soderbergh really nails like their relaxed attitudes, their kind of naughty
Hmm.
boy charm. They're cool and they're not like greedy, but they're really good at what they do, and doing so is like they use their wits rather than their brawns. एंड आई फील लाइक वह आसिफ को ना आपको मतलब ये इसकी 2010 में पॉन्टिंग का आउट है तो उसकी भी एक थोड़ी लंबी क्लिप है और उसमें जो है ये पॉन्टिंग को वही जैसे क्लार्क के साथ किया था बड़ा आई मे बी आउट भी नहीं होता है इसमें बट अगेन ही जस्ट लाइक ट्विस्टिंग हिम इनसाइड आउट और पीछे से ना कोई चिल्लाता है बॉयज रिलैक्स नहीं होना रिलैक्स नहीं होना and I can imagine all of them are stressed out but Asif when they cut to him and he is
Not at
just like
all.
he's smoking a joint or something, doesn't care, just kind of. And I feel that part of it was also so essential to his spectacle, to his persona, right? कि आप नाइस क्योंकि फास्ट बॉलर और तेज होने के साथ साथ वही के गुस्सा हो रहा है और मसल्स
Yeah.
दिख रही हैं और चिल्ला
Strange.
रहा है और गाली दे रहा है और घूरियां करा रहा है. Yeah, Stain's a great example. Even someone like Ambrose
Yeah.
who's so intimidating and he's wagging his finger and blah blah. Asif is literally like stealing, your grandparents' pensions, and while they gave him chai and ke kitna acha bachcha hai. Like Asif is the guy who sent out the first, Nigerian prince email, like like that.
You know what? And so when we discussed this like pre-recording, we missed this one element which I think both of us thought was too obvious because we are fans of the show. Succession, of course, I'm talking about here. You know, the cousin Greg
Yeah.
thing is like he looks exactly like Asif.
Yeah.
सबको मालूम है. लेकिन अभी एंड सॉरी फॉर पीपल हु हैवंट सीन सीजन 4 में जो स्पॉइलर जो आया ना ये जो तुमने बोला है ना अभी कि जिस तरह से वो हाइस्ट करता था if you remember this last episode where cousin Greg fires like 100 people on a Zoom call and he explains why HR thinks he's a good person to do this, right? Do you remember this line where HR
Yeah, he says कि I look like I care, but I don't actually care.
and this is
That's why I'm
Asif,
good.
that kind
Yeah.
of smiling assassin ke, it looks like I'm a it looks like I'm trying to get you out but I'm not really but I am really, and he's got that unassuming kind of thing. Ye analogy hai, this is where he's really like cousin Greg. He's like a smiling, it's the worst kind of phrase cliche ever but he literally was this like smiling chilled out assassin. वो आपकी ऐसे विकेट ले लेता था कि आपको पता भी नहीं चले. Cousin Greg is kind of firing you, and those people are all like, kind of, what is he doing? Something? What's he doing? And then he has to say that, I apologize if I'm being too wordy, but basically you've all been let go. Okay. लोग समझ नहीं रहे कि is Cousin
Yeah.
Greg firing me? Like, what's happening here, man? What's going on, guys? Asif, like, is he a fast bowler? Is he trying to get me out? I don't know. Oh, AB de Villiers, bold. अच्छा, ये हो गया मेरे साथ. It's that kind of. I think that is like a really true analogy, that he is. And Cousin Greg, by the way, would have made an excellent fast bowler because he's tall. Would have made an excellent Pakistani fast bowler because he's tall. And if you notice, he's got really long fingers as well. So वो यानी
And has like
zero
zero
moral,
morals. So I think
big smoking habit,
that
zero morals. Like, he is the Pakistan fast bowler.
Iska, I mean to continue like this last from my notes that I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
wanted to
I
mention
hope this is the
was
biryani
like
bit.
basically one thing. It's not a biryani bit. I'm sorry. This is actually um, we were basically talking about the fact I was talking to a friend and we are trying to like what is the definition of a fuckboy? Or
That bit.
okay, a lot of the things that are attributed only to fuckboys, like other men are doing, whatever. So what is making it a fuckboy? And it's not just that they're good looking or this or that. Like there's an X factor. And I feel when I was trying to figure out Asif, there was something that I thought is the definition of fuckboy because this is true of Asif well before he gets caught
Yeah,
up
yeah.
in spot fixing, right? What we were alluding to at the start. कि इसके मसले और इसके कानून के साथ मसले और मोरालिटी के साथ मसले ये सब कुछ बड़े अरसे से चलते आ रहे थे एंड I was like a fuck boy with Asif. His appeal and his need to be saved was immediately obvious. Like his like I think that's where fuck boys are so dangerous because like they kind of convince you that as like they have this like they're fun, but they also have this fucked up side to them which can be fixed, and it's worth the trouble. And I feel Asif, given how many fucking indiscretions he has, and Pakistan keeps taking him back into the team until in just a tiny
Yeah.
ass period, I feel that was the thing we all fell for as well, right? Like we're like, yeah, he's fucked up, but ये जब खेलता है,
हाँ.
जब ये चलता है, so, like it's you realize that you are taking a ride on a scorpion's back, but you're just like it's
You
worth
know
it.
what? I have a slightly, not dissenting but countering view to this. Is that I don't disagree with the whole idea of the sockboy thing, but I think he doesn't. I don't think he cares about being saved or fixed. I genuinely do not. He gives a
Yeah, yeah,
crap.
yeah.
Like, he
No, no,
doesn't
no.
play up to.
I what I'm sorry. So just to make it clear, like what I'm describing is how an outsider looks, which I think is the appeal for both fuckboys and Asif. That they're going to
Yes,
be who they are, but you feel that they're so
I
fucking
can just
amazing. If
I
I
can
can
just
change
fix
this one
them.
thing about
Yeah.
them, it'll be perfect. Yeah, I can fix this, and baki sab kuch will be the best. And that's basically the fatal flaw that gets you in because Asif or a fuckboy is not going to fix themselves. But you think that it is possible because their appeal, their charm is so
मुझे
overwhelming.
उस वक्त लगता था, because I was covering him and I was reporting on him, और फिर हर दिन कोई नया उसका होता था, like, वही में पकड़ा गया, बल्ला किसी ने मार दिया, ऐसे, हर दिन कुछ होता था. तो I think very quickly I attuned my thinking into just thinking that, देखो, he's not here for a long time, he's here for a good time, so just enjoy. जस्ट एंजॉय व्हाट यू कैन, कि जब बॉलिंग कराएगा तो बहुत मजा आएगा, लेकिन ये ना कभी गलती से सोचो कि वो 400 विकेट लेने वाला बंदा है, जो बैरी रिचर्ड्स ने एक दिन कमेंट्री में से पहली बार देख के साउथ अफ्रीका में कहा था 2006 में कि हियर, राइट हियर इज योर 400 नेक्स्ट 400 टेस्ट विकेट्स मैन, पाकिस्तान. एंड आई वाज लाइक, ओ वाओ, बैक देन
Yeah,
आई वाज लाइक थिंकिंग, हाँ शायद ये हो सकता है, लेकिन very quickly over the course of, and like, we're talking about a career that was what, 2000, and for Pakistan at least it was 2005 6 really to 2010. It's hardly a career, hardly a
yeah,
career. So, but very quickly.
yeah. Just like he not only is Pakistan not playing cricket, but जो छोटी बहुत खेल भी रहा है उससे भी वो ban है. So it's not even like he played all the possible matches. Like it's
Yeah,
crazy.
and so, very quickly it was that कि यार जो भी ये करे ना, enjoy करो उसका. And I'm trying to remember what his last test would have been.
Hello?
uh oh yeah, it was the Oval, the Lord's Test, right? I guess that would have been his, yeah, Lord's 2010, and I don't think he did especially well there. But like at that time, who knew? Yeah, who knew this was going to happen? And it's just to wrap this up, and we've kind of touched upon this earlier in the pod, but I think it's a great finishing point. This was your analogy when we were discussing this about what he was doing with his art, and that was that I think you said, if you remember, that we're a country of biryanis and kormas, and he was mainstreaming. I don't know if you remember, he was mainstreaming
Sushi.
sushi, exactly. So this is exactly what he was doing, and I from that I thought of that great French artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, who he did something amazing which went global very briefly, and so everyone understood. So your thing about the sushi was that I think everyone with Asif, everyone suddenly understood the real intricacies of bowling, of fast bowling, of setups, of subtleties, of nuances, of a victory not being a victory immediately, but maybe appearing as a victory afterwards. He did that, and you see that in all of the YouTube videos that are out there about. I believe. Do you remember some of the YouTube videos that you saw and you were like, "Acha, ye
Well,
is
it
level
was
tak ja
crazy. Yeah, like there was this video which I felt, oh, ये बिल्कुल अब एक मुख्तलिफ social economic class का ये है कि वो नाइस ऑब्वियसली उर्दू में थी, मगर उसमें ना वो आसिफ की बॉलिंग को डिस्क्राइब करता है कि I've written down somewhere कि आसिफ की बॉलिंग को आप उसी तरीके से एंजॉय करेंगे जैसे गाड़ी की अच्छी लाइट पे आप फील करते हैं ना. It's like, okay, I don't know what world this is this, but like that was also instructive in its own way कि उसका impact ये नहीं है कि सिर्फ मैं और आप जैसे बर्गर लोगों को interested, like everyone in different ways who, like, as long as you like cricket, as you just said, like you were into it because he was really displaying the skill of the sport you love.
Yeah, and I don't think there has been a bowler like that in Pakistan where people have talked, all kinds of people, whether it's like my old uncle, your old uncle, one my khala, a bhanji, bhatija, friend who doesn't watch cricket apart from the World Cup. I don't think there's ever been that I've come across a bowler who has sparked up this talk of like technique and nuance and aise kara. Like he's a bowler, I think that a lot of people would understand and watch the setup, right? He's
Yeah.
that kind of guy who did that, and I think if somebody does that, then McGrath की आप bowling देखते हैं तो आप उसके बहुत सारे spells आप यार छोड़ो यार, बकवास बकवास बकवास, ओ कितनी जबरदस्त wicket ले ली. With Asif, I think that setup was understood by a lot more people than is normal for that kind of bowling.
इनफैक्ट आसिफ की वही इस बात की सबूत यही है कि आसिफ की काफ़ी सारी वीडियोस है यूट्यूब पे, नॉट काफ़ी सारी बट इन मोर देन यू वुड एक्सपेक्ट, एंड नॉट आई डोंट सी दैट विद अदर बॉलर्स, जहाँ पे बैटर आउट ही नहीं हो रहा है, उन्हें बस दिखाया है कि वो किस तरीके से नचा रहा था और ख़त्म हो जाता है, लाइक एंड दैट इन इटसेल्फ आई फेल्ट वाज रियली इंस्ट्रक्टिव दैट यू आर नॉट, the attraction isn't ke, oh, he took this wicket, we had a lot of fun. It's just like, check this out, dude, this is how bowling is an art form.
Yeah, like you won't, he's not going to feature in like the 10 fastest balls ever bowled, the 10 greatest stumps ever broken and stuff, but he will have these random videos, which, by the way, and good luck with this podcast for us both, like Asif is clearly like still clickbait enough on all kinds of social media and the internet generally. The number of views videos of his generate on YouTube it's both insane and a testament to the guy's genius, I think.
So that's the Mohammad Asif episode. I feel like एक तरीके से हमने एक बड़ा बहुत अरसे से करना भी चाह रहे थे, और अब जब ये दुनिया में निकल जाएगी तो पता नहीं क्या तहलका मचाएगी मोहम्मद आसिफ की तरह. मगर उस्मान, proud of us for making this third episode happen. Thank you so much for joining.
I'm very proudy. Thank you all for whoever does listen to this. Thank you all to whoever listens to this. Thank you, Pakistan, for allowing the Ahmer's internet to exist for long enough for this episode to be recorded. And, God or whoever save Pakistan and keep everyone safe. That was
God save Mohammad Asif, bro.
Yes, that's the biggest thing. He's saved, man. Maryland में वो बैठा हुआ है, पिज्जा डिलीवर कर रहा है, उसके मजे हैं.
It's amazing. All right, Usman, take care. Bye.
Thanks.
एकदम इन्होंने वक्त बदल दिया, जज्बात बदल दिए, जिंदगी